right, everyone. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn, sponsored or presented by the Women in Science, Design, Engineering, and Manufacturing at Alamance Community College. I am super excited to have Heather Hasz with us today. She is the brand and community ambassador for DriveWorks, and Heather's going to say a little more about her job, what she's doing, how she feels in this role, being a woman in a rather male-dominated area. And if you do have any questions, just feel free to unmute yourself and ask that question, or also, of course, you can just type it in the chat box and I will watch that. So Heather, thank you so much for your time today. I am very excited to have you with us, and I'm also excited about your presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Bettina. And thanks for hosting me. I was super excited. First, I have a bit of a history with Alamance Community College because I work quite a bit with James Adkins, who's the head of the design department, right? Or the computer-aided drafting department down there. I was actually at your school about 1.5 years ago. I was down to visit and present at his SOLIDWORKS user group that he runs out of the school there. So I'm actually very familiar with your part of the world. It's quite a nice campus. I spent a handful of days between Charlotte and Piedmont Triad, is that what it is? Piedmont? Anyway, and I came over to your school as well. And so it was really great. I think the program that you're running is fantastic. I was super happy when I saw the email about the opportunity to come speak with everyone, and was happy that you accepted my contribution. So folks, my name is Heather Hasz. My role is brand and community ambassador, and I work for a software company called DriveWorks. So to back up a little bit and give you all kind of an idea of what our software does. A few weeks ago, you had a representative from Ashley Furniture come speak with your group, Betty Baker. Betty Baker is a product design engineer at Ashley Furniture, and they use the software product SOLIDWORKS. And so what I do want to say, by the way, is if you have any questions or anything, just unmute yourself, because I do want it to be more of a conversation, because I'm a people person. I love relationships, and I'm quite chatty. And so I welcome any contribution or anecdote or otherwise. So please don't be shy. So DriveWorks is a software that actually works with SOLIDWORKS. So Betty gave an example of some of the design interface that they might use with SOLIDWORKS. And so what our software does is our software allows you to take your SOLIDWORKS models. Is anyone here learning SOLIDWORKS right now? If you have your camera on, just raise your hand if you're familiar with SOLIDWORKS. No? Okay. So SOLIDWORKS is 3D CAD design software, and Betty uses SOLIDWORKS to design the furniture for Ashley Furniture. So for example, if she were designing a table with SOLIDWORKS, she would design the table using the different geometries that were available in that particular software. What our tool allows you to do is, say Ashley Furniture is designing this table. Your standard table might have 4 legs and a top, just for example's sake. Our software allows you to take that one table, load it into our software, create some rules behind it, and you can automate the redesign of that table over and over again if it changes dimension or size or shape, instead of having to reopen that model, make manual changes to your CAD files, and save everything. So our software allows you to automate your mechanical designs and configure, if you will. If you've ever gone online and made a custom configuration for something for yourself, whether you've made like a piece of jewelry with someone's name on it, or a phone case, or otherwise, you might have used a software online that might let you custom configure a product. And our software is along those lines. We allow you to configure your product. So my role with the team is I'm the brand and community ambassador. And what that really means is that I represent DriveWorks here in North America. I support our customer base. We do a ton of work to support the SOLIDWORKS user group community. We work a lot in education. We've launched some formal education because very much like Alamance Community College and SOLIDWORKS and some of the other technical institutions, we believe in workforce development and providing platforms for students or anyone interested to build up their skills base to increase employability for them. And so we do a ton to support the different areas of community that can help with that in the engineering space. And so I joined the DriveWorks team about 5 years ago to support them here in America. And so kind of a fun thing is DriveWorks is a British company. They're based in the north of England, outside of Manchester, UK. I joined them about 5 years ago as not only their first US hire, but just their first hire outside of their offices in the UK. They're a very close-knit team. And so that's a photo. I was there last fall, and I'm a dog mom. So of course I had to take a picture of their most recent addition to the DriveWorks team is their dog Ruby. She's an English lab. The folks in the top left corner. So I have a lot of pictures. I'm not big on death by PowerPoint with facts and figures and stuff, but I love to share pictures because then it's like I'm sharing with you the story from behind the camera, and I can talk a little more casually to that. The folks in the top photo with me that look like they're my proud parents, they're actually very proud owners. Those are the two owners of DriveWorks, Glenn Smith and Maria Sarkar. They're the co-founders. And that photo was taken at an event called SolidWorks World, which is the software company SolidWorks hosts an annual user conference, and we were there. And as a partner to SolidWorks, our software of course sits inside of SolidWorks. We were given an award called the Partner of the Year that was voted upon by our peers in the SolidWorks community. And in the bottom left corner, so over the course of the last year, from 2019 to 2020, the event SolidWorks World shifted brand names to 3D Experience World. So Dassault Systems, which is the owner of SolidWorks, just rebranded the event from SolidWorks World to 3D Experience World. It was hosted in Nashville, and I was completely overwhelmed and humbled, and I don't even know what words to describe it. I received an award that I was nominated for by my peers in the SolidWorks community for the SolidWorks Community Champion of the Year. And that was in a room of about 5,000 people that I was given this award and said a few words. But it was really a great lifetime opportunity for me because I love the work I do supporting the community, supporting the software, getting to know people from around the world. But to get an award for something like that, and I know we're talking a lot about women in engineering, to get an award as a woman in this field for that kind of work was really humbling for me because I didn't start out in engineering, not outright. I didn't start out in engineering, but just I want to share a few other photos with you, and I do share my story because I think that half of the reason I wanted to speak with you all today was to talk about being a woman in a primarily or formerly male-dominated engineering space, because I think we are gaining a lot of ground, but also sometimes your path to where you go isn't a straight line. And when I tell you my story, we'll kind of go on that journey together. So when my team photo was taken, it was taken about a year ago. I was invited to our headquarters in England because DriveWorks won an award from the Queen of England, and it's called the Queen's Award for Enterprise. And we won two of them. One was in technology innovation and one was in international trade. And these awards are the highest award that can be given to a private business in England. And they're actually given by the Queen herself. The Queen is not making many on-site appearances anymore, being in her 90s. And this was even pre-pandemic. She sends out a representative on her behalf. And so the gentleman there, the very tall gentleman standing next to me in the top right photo, he's her first lieutenant. So he's basically, he represents Her Majesty at events that she can't. And so he came out to our headquarters in the UK and he read a decree and he gave Glenn and Maria these double Queen's Awards. And it was really, for me, I'm just this, I sound like a Journey song, like just a small town girl, but I really was. And here I am shaking hands with Her Majesty's first lieutenant. I mean, when you go back to your high school reunion, like that's the story you want to tell. And it was really, I just gave myself goosebumps because I still kind of reflect on it and just think how, you know, how in fact did I get to this point. But with my role supporting community around the world, I do get to travel quite a bit. Well, I did get to travel a little bit up until about a year ago. And I get to travel all over the world, and I get to speak with engineers. I get to share what our software can do. I get to share with people how they can build up their skill set in our software, increase their employability, increase their job skills, make them more valuable. And this is just a snapshot, if you will, no pun intended. Actually, the James Atkins is in that photo on the lower left there when I was down in North Carolina last year. But just pictures of some of the meetings that I'm able to attend around the world where we talk about SolidWorks, we talk about engineering, we talk about DriveWorks, and it's really great to see over the course of even some of these photos, there's just more and more women that are getting involved and engaged in mechanical engineering. And so you had Betty Baker speak with you. So this is one of my favorite shares here. These are just slides of some really remarkable women that I have been blessed to work with over the course of, say, the last 15 years working in this particular area of engineering. The top left, of course, Betty Baker was here last month speaking with you folks. That was at, again, SolidWorks World last year. The photo at the bottom of the screen where I'm dressed like a 50s sock hop girl, that's obviously not normal attire for me. I was at a Halloween themed event, but the young women that came onto the table and spoke with me were from Beaumont High School. It's a high school, it's an all-female school in Ohio. And they were part of a robotics team. And if you spell the word robotics backwards, it's like store-bots, Stobor, and that's the name of their team. And they're a competitive robotics team, and it's an all-female school. And so that was really inspiring for me to talk design, to talk SolidWorks, but to see how motivated the school was to be able to enable these young women to be exposed and gain skills at the high school level in STEM. And so I was super excited to have a chance to meet them. And they were actually at SolidWorks World about 3 years ago. They brought their robot to show on the main floor where I had accepted that award in that other photo. They had been at the same event a few years earlier. And then at the bottom right, before I worked for DriveWorks, I worked for SolidWorks for about 10 years, and that's Marie Blanchard. She's the Worldwide Director of Education for SolidWorks, and she lives and breathes education. She is actually a really nice contact, Bettina, as well. If you were looking for any more contributions into your program here, she would be a fantastic speaker for you. But now, how did I get here? How did I get to travel to meet the Queen's Lieutenant, and how to get to talk SolidWorks, and how do I get to embrace all of this newfound interest with women? I want to share my story, but I want to share my story, give you the perspective, again, that not everybody's journey is straight and it's yours. Sometimes plans don't go exactly as you want them, and you just have to try. And I say try, you just try to keep your eye on what your goals are. And traditionally as a woman, and I'm 47 years old, so my perspective on life and as I start to go backwards in my story might be a little bit different than what some of you have faced if you're younger, but I still think the foundation is there. And pursuing my own goals while having so many other things kind of stacked up against me has led me here. And so when I start to share some of my story with you, it's not to make anyone sad. It's actually, I'm not going to spoil the story. So I come from a small town, a small city in downstate New York called Beacon, New York. And in its heyday, it was a very prosperous city on the bank of the Hudson River, about 50 miles north of New York City. And as with any city in a, or town on a river, the river was utilized for transportation, for manufacturing, unfortunately, in some parts of New York for disposal. But the river at one point was a major source of commerce for power. It powered textile mills and masonry. There was a big brick factory in our town, but those all happened before I was born. And so when I was born, the factories had closed, the factory owners had closed up shop and moved out of town, which left a fairly economically depressed area in New York where it really didn't offer a lot of opportunity. And I came from a working class family. My dad was a mailman. My mom was a butcher's assistant, and she was only part-time. And it was not until we went to school. And again, it was, I don't know if it's a generational thing, but I never went to preschool. I just went right to kindergarten. I was home with my mom and my grandma until I was old enough to go to kindergarten. So I guess it was, grandma nursery school. And so, and I grew up early on. I was in a male dominated home. I had 3 brothers. So it was mom and myself and my dad, but our 3 brothers. And the top photo there is my old high school. I don't even think they build them like that anymore, but that's Beacon High School. It's actually been closed for a number of years. I think it's been repurposed as some kind of an artist's loft or some way to repurpose the building. The city was able to keep that. I graduated Beacon High School class of 1991, but between my junior and senior year, I lost my mom to breast cancer. And so I was, at such a young age of 16, I was now trying really hard to get through high school. But again, we had a fairly traditional family. So some of those expectations as the only female in the house organically rolled over to my shoulders, for better or for worse. I had a decent relationship in the house with my brothers, but it was a struggle for me to get through my junior, senior year. But I always go back and I think my mom raised me well enough so that way when she passed away, I could finish raising myself on my own. But not having that strong female role model for some of those years. As a mom now, I know that I missed out on some of those times because I think when you're a young woman, you love your mom and then you go through a part of life where you don't like your parents so much, but then you come back around from what I call the dark side of the moon. And but I don't dwell on that. I just kind of move forward. What you will see in the bottom picture, and I love to share this photo because whose prom date has better hair than them, right? I mean, that's my prom date from my senior high school photo, my senior high prom. And it's just fun, to go back in time. It's like a time capsule. So I graduated high school and with the realization that there was no college fund available for me. And I really wanted to go to college. I was going to be a first generation college student. My brothers had dropped out of high school. So in my family, I would have been I was a first generation high school graduate, but I would have definitely been a first generation college. And it just wasn't in the cards. There wasn't any money. That magical college fund that I thought might have been there just simply wasn't there. So I had to shift what my goals were going to be. And there was a business school in Poughkeepsie, New York. So to give you a kind of a landmark where I grew up, Poughkeepsie was about 20 minutes north of where I lived. And there was a business school there called Chrysler Business Institute. And you'll all appreciate this photo. This was an ad taken from a local newspaper from somewhere around 1979, 1980. In its day, it was a secretarial school. That's where young women went to get the clerical skills they needed in order to go work in an office. And so it had evolved a bit. And so I graduated in 1991 from high school and I enrolled in this. It was called an office manager certificate program because it was only 9 months. It was reasonable for me to pay, or at least to borrow that kind of money to pay. And it was going to give me those skills. I figured if I could get some skills, I could get a job and then I could figure out my next path. And so off I went to Chrysler Business School. I did learn how to type. I did learn how to take dictation. They actually still taught those skills, but it was worth it. And again, I knew it would help me get a job down the road. In between going to school and graduating from Chrysler Business School, I met at the time, my boyfriend Rick, who became my first husband, and he lived in the Boston area. And so when I finished, there's just a lot of weekend trips back and forth to visit each other. But when I finished up Chrysler Business Institute, I left my little town of Beacon, New York, and I packed up my little Buick Skylark and I drove off and moved into the Boston area. And it was sometime around 1992. So when I talk about no direct path, I'm really going to say it's no kidding whatsoever. I moved into this area in 1992 and I wanted to go to school. I still had that in my head. I was doing temp jobs. I worked in record keeping at a prison. I actually ended up doing auto auction paperwork for cars that were being auctioned at the auction blocks every week. I just took temp work in order to help pay the rent and pay for groceries after I had moved up to the Boston area. And I ended up enrolling in Middlesex Community College, which is very similar to Alamance Community College. It was a 2-year school, and I had always had a keen interest in environmental issues. And I enrolled in a program called it was an associate's degree program in environmental technology. And it was a very technology, equipment, engineering based program, but it was very tactile. Again, it was a 2-year degree. I was going to learn how to use air quality testing equipment. It gave you a background in a lot of different areas so you could choose how you wanted to move forward. And it was at that point that I also landed a full-time job working at a newspaper in the classified department, which was kind of fun because I got to see all the job ads coming in. So I kind of had first dibs on them. And I found an office job. Again, taking those skills from Chrysler Business School, I was able to get an office job working in a local Board of Health office. So I'm not sure how things are set up down there, but in Massachusetts, every town has their own health inspector that inspects restaurants and apartments and water quality. And as such, there was an office that needed to be run. So I took a job as the office manager for our local Board of Health office, and the town offered some tuition reimbursement. So I was like, I'd never heard of that before. Tuition reimbursement. Somebody's going to help me pay for school. That's fantastic. So I enrolled mine up at this part-time. I was working, and Rick and I were married in 1994. We actually were married. That's me. I look like a child bride in that photo. At the of the original Woodstock Festival. It's kind of just a fun little, pop culture reference for you. He was a bit older than I was and quite a fan of that whole scene. So why not? So we were married in 1994. I had a job. I was going to school part-time, and things were moving along fairly well. I was going into this field that back in 1993, there were very few women involved in the classroom. I mean, I was in a class, I was the only female. And in some of the wastewater classes, I got my, I went and got my wastewater treatment plant operator's license. There was no other female even registering for that kind of thing but I wanted to learn how things were happening on the back end. And I had such an interest in learning how wastewater went from what it was to being discharged as meeting drinking water standards. I just had like this keen interest to understand all of that. So I pursued that. I was a newlywed, 1994. Come the spring of 1995, my husband, Rick, gets diagnosed with colon cancer. So now we have the pause button hit. So now here I am, 22, 23 years old. And I'm now supporting my husband through significant cancer surgery and chemotherapy and being there to support him. So the pause button is put on school because I needed to take care of my husband. I was raised that way. It was my role to help take care of him. So it was a very long year and things were put on hold. Fortunately, we both, had great health insurance and we were married. So there was support there from his family. We had a very small moment of remission. And we found out in March of 1997 that the cancer had returned. And in April of 1997, we also found out that I was expecting our daughter. And so now I had a terminally ill husband and I was pregnant the whole time, still trying really hard to pursue my own goals, but of course now completely needing to refocus my efforts on caring for Rick and myself and again, still looking down the road at what my goals were. But sadly, we lost Rick in August of 1997. I was 5 months pregnant and I was 24 years old, and now I was a widow. And so um, when I talk about that in other audiences, I always pose the question, what were people doing at 24? You know, a lot of even my own friends from high school were still in college or pursuing their master's degrees or not even married yet. And here I was married for 3 years, expecting a baby, and all of a sudden I'm a widow. So the idea of school was completely put on hold. Everything I had worked for and wanted at that point felt like it was just stripped away from me. And so now my goal was to be a good mom and take care of this little baby who now had no idea the tragedy that had befallen her before she was even born. So school was on hold indefinitely at that point, and that's 1997. So I had already been up, by the way, I don't know that I hold the record, but longest years to get your associate's degree. I might be in the running for this, but no additional money was available at the time because I did have a full-time job, and I was very fortunate that I did have a full-time job and I had great health insurance. And so the universe does try to take care of its own sometimes. But, you know, there were months where my cable was turned off because I had to pay the electricity or the rent had to be paid. So, you know, I had to call and negotiate with the light company. But things kind of work out over time. I was able to find, it's funny when I tell this story now, because I think, how did I even think to do some of these things? I found aid was available through the community college. There was actual aid packages that the school, they were like payment programs, but it was aid that was that was available for me. And so I was able to start taking classes. And it was around that time that online learning was kind of coming to the surface. I know I'm going to age myself, right? But I'm back in the days of America Online and Busy Signals. But online classes were basically, I took an English composition class, and it was the instructor basically emailing you the syllabus, and it was an email out, and then you attached your document back to her. There was no online discussions, there was no Blackboard, there was no platforms available. It was strictly online, meaning email. And so when I did start taking classes, fortunately there were some online things. So I thought, I'm going to do these onlines because I worked full time and I had the baby, and it just seemed to fit. And over time, through other areas, I was able to buy a condo. So I was starting to rebuild my life and try to figure out, where was I before all of this happened. And so, and I was still working at the municipality. I worked there for the better part of 15 years, and it was a great environment, and it was super supportive. And over time, you saw more and more people in public health. It went from my being one of two females in my office to having more and more female compliance officers and inspectors. And I watched it evolve over the course of 15 years to see where there were female health directors being appointed, people in charge of public health agencies in the different cities and towns. And even in Massachusetts now, the director of public health is a female. And so I watched that all unfold, and it was really exciting times. But the gentleman up in the top right corner, I met him at my daughter's daycare. So I met what would become my second husband, Earl, at daycare. Our daughters were best friends in preschool, and we started spending a lot of time together. We got to be really good friends. He worked for a software company called SOLIDWORKS, which I hadn't heard of at the time because I was in more of the civil engineering area. And we got to know each other. And in July of 2006, we got married on the beach in Maine. So clearly I don't get married in traditional places, but Woodstock and then the beach, but no regrets. It was kind of a lot of fun for us to be there with our kids. And I also, over the course of time, was finally able, in 2006, I received my associate's degree from Middlesex Community College, but it took so long that the degree I had signed on for back in 1993 in environmental technology had been sunsetted. So it wasn't even a degree anymore. There was nothing, there was no program anymore. So I had to take all of these environmental classes and add them into electives. And I got an associate's degree in liberal studies, which was not what I wanted at the time. I wanted the environmental technology thing, but nonetheless, it elevated me to that next level. And I ended up leaving public health in 2008, and I took a job with SolidWorks. And it was at that point I went from the civil engineering side of the world into the mechanical engineering side of the world. And by 2008, you were starting to see more and more females in that engineering space. But I decided that I wanted to continue to pursue my education because SolidWorks had some education reimbursement as well. And so I switched paths. I went to a state school here, UMass Lowell, University of Massachusetts, and I was pursuing a degree there. And it was going to take I was already an adult student, I was already well into my later 30s, if you want to, maybe I was 40. And I just, I wanted to find a better path. I wanted to find something that would cater more to an adult student. And so I did end up switching from UMass Lowell over to Southern New Hampshire University. They had an accelerated degree program. So these classes were 8 weeks long. And so I started out just kind of getting my feet wet in the classes. And by the way, I switched from working in SolidWorks, I kind of got a taste for business and working in the community. And so I switched over to a marketing degree because I just combined both my interest in technology and engineering, but then my love of people. And I applied both and pursued my Bachelor of Science in Marketing from Southern New Hampshire University. And it was actually in 2016, I apologize, I think I had said in my bio, it was 2015 that I received my Bachelor of Science in marketing from Southern New Hampshire University. So all in all, it took me 23 years to go from the first classes at Middlesex Community College to getting my degree. But for me, that was my goal was, and I didn't need the degree at that point. I had moved on to SolidWorks. I had a great job there. Subsequently, after about 10 years, I moved on to DriveWorks and really had locked into this job. Like I loved the work I was doing at SolidWorks, engaging in the engineering community, helping students kind of, learn different technologies and understand what the software could do. But the job at DriveWorks is the job I was meant to do. So now I'm on the road and engaging with different communities face to face and creating those connections. But so I didn't need to finish it. I wanted to finish it. And it was personal for me. And it was personal for me because I found this picture and I thought it was really appropriate for our audience today because I did it for myself. I didn't do it for my husband. I didn't even do it for my first husband. I didn't do it for my dad. I didn't do it for my mom. I did it for me, but I did it for my daughter because in 2016, she was just graduating from high school and I needed her to know that you see it. This is organic. This was actually written. I had finished my degree in December of 2016, but I had to wait to walk the stage. And I was walking that stage, ladies. Let me just tell you, there was no way I was not walking that stage in May of 2017. And we got to write on these little whiteboards and have fun. And I said, it's never too late because I honestly the message for me was just more, I wanted her to know that sometimes as women, we want our kids to be successful and we want them to be happy and we want them, to follow a path. But I also wanted her to know that for me, I wanted her to be happy first and then successful. And if that meant taking 23 years to get your degree, then it took that. I wouldn't wish my story upon anybody, but that kind of led me down the path that I am right now. And having been given the opportunity, having earned, not being given, having earned the opportunity to meet the Queen's Lieutenant, to be having this award given to me, to have the opportunity to travel and speak and maybe even inspire one or two people. And so after everything I had been through personally, professionally, academically, I decided that I'm going to train and run a marathon because why not? right? And so that's exactly that photo right there on the right is in May of 2019. I lost about 100 pounds and decided that I was going to run a marathon. And so I finished the marathon in a little over 5 hours, but I did it. And I think I ran my first marathon and I retired from marathon running on the same day. I think I'm done with just one and done. So, but again, you know, my reason for wanting to share with you all just the perspective of being the female and having to take on those traditional roles of, you know, supporting my family as a teenager with my mom's passing, supporting my ailing husband, taking care of my daughter, you know, all of those traditional roles can still be maintained as long as you kind of just keep your eye on the prize and not even on the prize, just on your goal, whatever that is. And so I'm super happy that you let me tell my story. And it's been 22 years. My daughter is going to be 23 years old in December. And she's currently serving in AmeriCorps, which is the federal service program. And she's right now, I'm in Boston. She's out in Sacramento in California. And she's on a 1-year service commitment with them. And I'm proud of that because she's doing it for herself. You know, she's using the opportunity to go out, and she's finished her degree already, by the way, which for me, I just breathe a sigh of relief because she finished it. She's done with her bachelor's degree. If she chooses to go further, her choice, and it's her dime. But you know, if she chooses to go any further, but she's out there right now clearing. She's working at an outdoor environmental school, and she's clearing something called Scotch broom, which is a highly flammable weed. And they're trying to clear the property because, of course, it reduces the risk of wildfires. And so she's doing some service back to the country right now, and I'm super proud of that. And so, and I hope that, you know, some of my drive and what she was able to see me doing, because even when she was little, they're watching. You know, she's seeing me do homework while she's doing homework, and saying no to wanting to go out with friends on the weekend myself because I had to write a paper. And so all of those really great influences, I think that we're building more and more of a strength around engineering because the younger ones are watching us succeed. And when they see us succeed, it kind of paves the road for them as well. So, so thanks for letting me share my story. If anybody has any questions or, you know, we could have an online cocktail together after that one, take you on a little path. It's like a Lifetime movie.
What an amazing story, Heather. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thanks.
And it's so personal. I'm truly inspired and amazed. And I will just open the floor for any questions. So if anybody has a question, please unmute yourself and just ask.
No real question, but I did want to say that I did online learning, and I had to send my stuff in the mail. So I didn't even go through email. It was mail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
it's
next
funny.
thing was faxing. Then it was faxing.
I missed that time period. I jumped over that point in my learning. If I had gone back earlier, I probably would have had the same thing. And isn't that funny to see where things are now? Do you take any online classes now?
Well, I'm teaching. I teach some online classes, and I'm not taking any right now. My dad keeps pressuring me into get my PhD, and maybe one day I will. But no, I tell my daughter, you know, we're all mostly at home, and I have a daughter, and I have a story sort of like yours, but not completely. But I do a lot. I do a lot for my child too, and I tell her, you know, I mean, back in the day, I used to do this and I used to do that. So you've actually got it a whole lot better.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little intimidated well, because in the online learning with emails and forth, that was easy. But then when I took a break and I went back, and all of a sudden there was Blackboard, and you know, it was a little intimidating for me because I didn't really know what that technology was. And I mean, I embraced it and I was able to, use it. And, but now there's so many different learning platforms available. And especially now in our current situation, globally, having that, um, it really is, there's quite a bit of learning that can be done now. In theory, I could take a class at Alamance Community College. Do you know what I mean? Like um, and I'm up here, but it's our reach. I think I was just saying before everybody dialed in, I think different platforms that we've all just learned to manage for communication, Zoom and Teams and GoToMeeting and, all of these different ones. I think in general, we've all been able to kind of shift over to virtual. It might not be easy, but the technology is there. So,
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
currently, can you hear me?
yeah.
Yes.
I'm currently a student at Alamance Community College and I work here. When we transformed to a completely online school back in the spring, I have done online classes before, but only one class a semester. But it was very difficult actually, because we were like going to class and doing things, and all of a sudden you can't come to class, but you're going to be online and learn it. And it was a learning experience. It was a difficult experience. We are half online and doing hybrid classes, and we're not nearly at full capacity, and we have half classes. I have to student bodies in a class, and then other half is on another day. And with this pandemic, it's like it's all the colleges around the world probably. So it's not, it's technology has gotten better, and the ability to take the classes has gotten a lot better, but there are still times that, internet doesn't work, hurricanes on the horizon, stuff like that. So it's interesting, and you really have to figure out different ways to apply yourself.
I think even as a woman, I don't, not to speak for any one of you, but even here for myself, I've had a full-time home office since I took the job with DriveWorks. And so I have figured out my home office space over almost 5 years, but shifting from being in a physical either school or workplace and then shifting to home. And then depending on how your family dynamic is, having some of the traditional things still expected of you when you're home, it's also finding that balance too, right? Between I need to work right now, but I'm going to fold some laundry while I'm on a conference call because it's just, but it's been interesting to see some of my friends kind of transition, but also have to, it's never like an us against them when I say women versus, men as far as the workplace, but it's been an interesting transition for me to see them have to assert themselves to say, just because I'm home doesn't mean I'm available to get the kid from point A to point B. You still need that partnership, but, if mom's working from home all of a sudden, everything doesn't necessarily have to go onto her plate. You can still kind of divvy those things up. And so it's been interesting for me to see some, our kids are grown. My daughter, she was in a virtual platform for the last 4 months of school. I think they were sent home in March, I think. So maybe 2 months of her senior year of university, they were sent home, but in the spring. But it's been interesting because I think it's the work-life balance for a lot of us. And I say us as in women because, maybe men do struggle with the same balance of things, but I think traditionally women have always taken on a little bit more at home. So good for us. But thanks, Bettina. Thanks for hosting me again. I really appreciate it. Are you all, I think that there was somebody that was a teacher, but are the rest of you all students at Alamance? Yay.
My name
Oh,
is
no.
Page, and
No.
I work at GKN in Alamance County,
Oh,
and
okay.
Your story is amazing, and just your drive and your persistence. How, I guess what I'm curious about is like, how do you keep that momentum, and how do you keep that drive? I mean, just taking all that time to just really chase your dream to get your degree, and then like that's got to be tough. But then like training for a marathon, like again, you choose all
Yeah.
these things, and there's so many hurdles, and like how do you not get fatigued like
Sure.
in like your drive?
So I think to go back, even back to my earlier years in my school days, I was never athletic. I, I was significantly overweight for most of my adult life. It goes back, even deeper. My childhood, you know, my dad was an alcoholic. I'll just say that. So when my mom died and I was, left with the brothers and the dad, it was supportive, but there was also this really silent thing because people didn't talk about that either. He drank, but nobody talked about that. And so some of it for me, my drive, I think, was when I say I didn't do it for anyone else, for myself, I did do it for myself, but I also did it almost in a way to say, I'm going to survive all of this. And somehow it wasn't always like that though, because I was 24 when Rick died, and everything I had wanted and planned for, we were starting a family, was taken away. So it was really dark. Like I can tell the story now 20 plus years later, but I was broken. The foundation was cracked. I made really bad decisions. Like I used to say my life was like a combination of like Sex in the City and Punked. It was like my dating life. It was a I probably owe some men I dated early on like a cuddle or like a sorry card, or something, because it took me. I went from my father's roof to my first husband's roof, so I didn't even know who I was when Rick died. I had to learn how to balance a checkbook, and so and how to balance money and stuff. And so I think that somewhere deep down, some kind of survival instinct kicked in, because going through it all and kind of coming out on the other end, once I finished my bachelor's degree, I thought, now what am I going to do? I was a student my whole life. Like I felt I was a student. I mean, I was 45 years old when I got my degree, and it's only a couple years ago. And so when I decided to run the marathon, the a marathon. Oh, when I say the marathon, I think I'm talking about like Boston Marathon. I would love to run that, but I don't know if the body might not be, I don't know. We'll see. The mechanics might not be there, but um, I think it was more, I wanted to run to prove to myself, but I did want to run to prove to my past I was, um, that life wasn't life wasn't really going to kick my butt and leave me down there. That I think I wanted a little bit of I wanted some kind of redemption for myself. I mean, getting my degree was one thing, but I think I wanted some kind of personal redemption for myself, like deep down, like to feed the inner Heather, not the mom, not the wife, not even the student. I wanted something that really challenged me deep down to my core. And it was hard. It was the hardest thing, aside from being a single mom and, earlier on in the story, physically speaking, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. And mentally, there were some dark moments on 26 miles. It wasn't all like roses and selfies, there was pretty dark moments, but that was also kind of earlier on in my years, there were dark moments. And so I guess it's kind of a metaphor, like running that marathon is kind of a metaphor for my young adult life. See, oh my gosh, Erin, you should be a therapist. You just brought that one out in me right there. But every time I go backwards and I tell my story, I always also feel like it helps me heal a little bit to tell the story. And I use humor, because if I don't use humor, I almost earlier on, I felt like if I didn't use humor, I was just going to collapse into myself. So, and I had a really great therapist for a long time. And so, So I think a combination of those things, but to keep moving forward and to keep driving forward, I think I have a super supportive husband. My husband, Earl, now he took up cycling, you know, so we kind of support and challenge each other too. And so I always say Earl is my husband, because my first husband, I met him when I was 18. You know, it was like the kind of love and partner that you meet when you're 18 is different from the partner I met when I was almost 40. And so he's my grown-up husband. So there was a movie I watched recently where they talked about the balloon and the line, right? Or something like that. Like, I'm the balloon and he's the line, you know? And so he just keeps me tethered in. So, but good question. I know I didn't answer it, but I tried to kind of, I don't think there's a real answer. I think it's always changing for me. So.
I think that sometimes things in life are kind of like you have to go through them. So one day you're able to face the other things and even help other people in it. But I remember being a runner just in high school. And when I was having my first child, they said, you got to focus on something. And in my mind, it was like, I'm going to win the race. I'm going to keep pressing. I'm going to keep pressing. And of course, I had my child all natural. And I know that's like a woman thing, but my whole focus.
Uh-oh.
No, sir.
We might have lost her.
I think she's trying to come back, but not really working.
Sorry, can y'all see me?
We can hear you again.
We can hear you.
And I would say pretty much that some of the things that you face are help the things in the future.
I'm sorry, we lost her.
Yep. All right, well, maybe when she comes back, she can ask her question again. Does anybody else have a question for Heather?
Or want to chat?
Or you can use
I don't want to keep you all because I'm sure you have other tasks too.
I have a question for you, Heather, and that's actually a question that I learned from Erin because she was our speaker last month. And the question is, what would you tell your 10-year younger self?
Great question. 10 years ago? You mean 10 years back?
So if you could talk to you're 47, you said, if you could talk to the 37-year-old Heather now, what would you tell her?
I would tell her to wait and see what's about to happen. I would tell her to keep going, to keep doing exactly what she was doing, because the reward is going to outweigh the struggle. And I've done this exercise even going further back in life, you know, to like teenage Heather, you know, to say it's all going to be okay, you know, that everything that's going to happen to you is going to happen to you to bring you to the place that you're, you know, it sounds cliche when you say it, when I say it out loud, you know, but yeah, I would say 10 years ago, Heather, I would say just keep doing exactly what you're doing, because mistakes or successes, it's going to bring you to kind of a really cool place that I'm in right now at 47. It's to see the success of my daughter, you know, and see that as a reflection of things I was able to impart to her and the example being set. But whether it was dark or otherwise, you know, just kind of keep doing, keep moving forward, because the reward is going to be fantastic.
That's awesome.
I had a question. You said you were traveling. Is it because of the pandemic or the pandemic?
Yeah, you know, we do a lot to, like when I was down in North Carolina last year, I was down there for a week. We went to some SOLIDWORKS user group meetings, but then we also support, our software is sold through There's a sales we sell it through a sales channel, and Trimec is our reseller down in North Carolina. And so we sell our software through Trimec. So we were there to support an event with them. And then I don't travel. I would have never been able to take this job when my daughter was little either. And so, but in the fall, I think last year, I think in the month of October, I was on the road every single week at supporting different events for our software all over the country. Kind of on this side of the country, though. It was like New Jersey, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Indiana. I think I went North Carolina. I think Indiana was as far west as I had gone last year, but the fall before I spent 2 weeks in California, doing some events and some customer visits. And so, but yeah, it's pandemic related. Like we've had to curtail our travel, and I haven't been to England to see my folks in the offices over there since September of 2019. So I've seen some of them because they were over here in the early part of the spring before everybody went into lockdown. And interestingly enough, England is in another lockdown right now. They're in a significant lockdown. And so it's been interesting kind of keeping tabs between our two countries on different things as far as spikes and, different behaviors. And so I miss the travel, but I will tell you, it's kind of a nice break too, because I do like to travel, but I do like to be home. My garden has never looked better than this summer, I'll tell you, with no traveling. And so, and my second husband here, he had a heart attack in January. By the way, ladies, I'm like, really? This is not, you are not, no, I forbid it. No, it was a mild heart attack. He had a blockage and we dealt with it, and he's healthy, but I'm not having that, by the way. That's just not going to happen. So we've taken a low profile to travel, even for personal reasons, just to reduce his exposure to any kind of infection. And so, but when you travel a lot for work, having a little bit of a respite, it's a blessing. But he travels too, and we have a little bit of a groove in our relationship. And so when he doesn't travel, sometimes I'm like, don't you have to travel someplace? Don't you have to go somewhere? And so I'm like, don't you have to, can you just go out in the camper? Can you just go out in the trailer and sleep for a couple of days? Just text me. But we've adjusted. He's got a home office right now too. So we're all kind of locked in together, but I look forward to traveling again. But I think travel's going to be different. I think we're coming out of this with a little bit of a different twist on travel. I think that we've proven concept in a lot of areas in the workplace and in the marketplace that we can do some of the stuff that we were doing physically remote. And it's not the same, but I think some of it could be replaced. If I had to travel down to speak to you, I might not have had the budget to get on a plane to come down to speak for the day. So we can do some of these things a little more fluidly now. It's not the same, but it's that connection.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm very, very thankful that you had time and energy and to actually speak to us. And that's definitely something that we have taken advantage of, just being able to have people speak to us that normally wouldn't be able to do that. So I am very, very appreciative of that. And unfortunately, we have approached the end of our hour. I would love to keep talking to you, Heather.
No, it's great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. And Bettina has my email address. So if anybody wants to reach out for anything more, or feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. If you want to make that connection, I'm certainly open to that by all means. And maybe I'll run into some of you someday down the road when you're in, when we're back to being all together again. But until then, everybody stay safe and healthy. And Bettina, good luck with the rest of are you done with your speaking series now? Or is
No, we'll continue doing that.
That's great. That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening to my story.
Thank you so much, Heather. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Take care.
Bye. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Whoops, I got to stop sharing. There.